Hey everybody, Flawed Guy here yet again. Glad to be back. We've gone through quite a few studies about, the kingdoms as listed in the book of Daniel. And as I promised, I would come back with a video or another series of videos on, this kingdom or empire that has yet to be formed. Just kind of want to go over that tonight. Um, Again, thanks for watching. I may in the future, in the next couple weeks, try to start doing some live stream videos and let y'all be aware of that. That way, y'all can comment and stuff while the streaming is going on, and I can see and maybe we can answer questions and things of that nature. So that might be kind of neat and something to look forward to in the future. But without wasting any more time, I wanted to get into uh, this future kingdom I alluded to and spoke of in the last video. Please catch up on all those videos about, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome. And so we're just going to continue on that last study that about Rome and that fourth beast. So let's just jump right in again. If you get your Bibles out or you got your e-sword, just click on to the Daniel chapter 2, and we'll just read again, kind of keep going back to those key verses. So I'm going to start in Daniel chapter 2, and we were talking again about Nebuchadnezzar's dream and the interpretation, and we had gotten to the fourth kingdom. So I'll just read in verse 40. It says, "The fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall it break in pieces and bruise." And we discussed that and how that was the Roman Empire, how it was a great and mighty empire, and became authoritarian in nature, and it was, it started out with like a republican form of government. It was different than other empires before it, and we go on in verse 41. This is where we're kind of getting to today. It says, "Whereas thou saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay." So we also talked about how that later on in the Roman Empire, the kingdom was divided, and it was divided into the west and the east, and um, that would coincide with these two legs of iron here. What is interesting, I found, I believe it was 364 AD. We can look that up just to be sure and double check me on that. But there was the empire was divided, the Roman Empire. It had been divided, several times over the course of its lifespan. But around this time, what's interesting is coinciding with two legs. I thought this was kind of interesting. It was actually governed or ruled by like two brothers, Valens and Valentinian, or I forget. But what we can you can look that up. I'll double check that in a moment. But what's interesting is that would be where two actual brothers, two rulers, had actually ruled over the empire. And then, as you see, it says the feet and toes were part of potter's clay, part of iron. The kingdom would be divided. So you go from legs, for instance, the west and east of the Roman Empire, into these feet, which are part iron and part clay. And it would be part strong and part weak. And as you know, that the Roman Empire, the eastern side of the empire, started to become, stronger than the western side as time went on. And what I thought was interesting and mentioned was that if we were to assume that, there's five toes on each foot, then it's safe to assume that there would be potentially divisions of five toes in the western half of the empire and 5 toes being in the eastern half of the empire. That's something that I haven't really seen much commentary on. It's something I had thought about, over the years. It's something I want you guys to think about as we go through the study. So it goes on to say in verse 42, as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, the kingdom would be partly strong and partly broken. Okay. Whereas thou saw iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with the clay. And in the days of these kings, this is verse 44, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So what's interesting there is basically what you have is, as I said, there will be a future empire that's represented by the feet and toes coming out of what was the iron of the legs, the solid iron of the legs in the statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream that we discussed and have shown slides on. And there would be 10 toes as part of this future empire. And it's interesting. It says, in the days of these kings, okay, that's obviously the kings, which we'll see are the 10 toes here on this statue of that are part iron and part clay, part weak, part strong. So there's elements of strength and authoritarianism, if you will, what authoritarian type government, if you will, kind of like under Rome, under the iron, where it breaks in pieces and takes over, and it takes over all the other ones before it. But then there's elements of this future kingdom that are going to be weak. And what's interesting, really interesting, it says, in the days of these kings, okay, the 10 kings as symbolized by the 10 toes, okay, it says the God of heaven will set up a kingdom. So that means that this future empire will see the return of God to this earth in physical form, bodily form, if you will, in all of his glory, to basically take over at the time when the antichrist is here. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But for now, I just want you to see that there are 2 feet, part of iron, part of clay, and on 2 feet, let's say 5 toes, okay? 5 on this foot, 5 on the other. We know that Rome was divided into the west and to the east, and that this kingdom is yet future, which I believe could be in our lifetime. We'll have to wait and see. There has to be some upheavals or some sort of geopolitical shifting over there in what would be the boundaries of the ancient Roman Empire. And, dig into that, look up some maps and stuff, and kind of get into how that happened and what those boundaries are. And again, I'll show you a map. We'll provide a map with this video. And know that there's going to be a future kingdom, and that in this image, it's the clay, feet, and toes. And that during the time of whatever future kingdom this is, whatever that entails, whatever it ends up looking like, that God is going to come back and destroy it and take over on this earth and set up his own kingdom. And so let's just kind of go on and continue to study. So that was the image as we've been flip-flopping back and forth between the image and Daniel chapter 2. We've always been going back to Daniel chapter 7. And in Daniel chapter 7, again, we spoke of Rome being that 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly. That's Daniel 7, chapter 7, verse 7. This dreadful and terrible beast, it had great iron teeth. So again, we have that comparison of iron with iron teeth here with the iron legs and the dual nature of those legs in the dream we just discussed. And it says it devoured, broke in pieces, stamped the residue with the feet of it. It was diverse from the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So let's go on into verse 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them, among the 10, another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were the eyes like a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And it goes on to say, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the judgment was set, and the books were opened. And it goes on to say, I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body was destroyed, and given to the burning flame. And concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. And then it goes on to say in verse 13, I saw in the night visions, behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. And his dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom which shall not be destroyed. So what I want you to see here is, again, we're going back to all these dreams and these visions. This one is of a dreadful and terrible empire, or the beast, which we said was Rome. We compared that with Daniel chapter 2. And this particular beast in Daniel 7, which was dreadful and terrible and had iron teeth, broken pieces, it said it had 10 horns. And as Daniel was considering these 10 horns on this beast, which we would say would be the Roman Empire, well, out of this Roman Empire, 10 horns spring up. And among the 10, there comes an 11th horn, or another one, let's say, a little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up. Now that means, if you were to consider this, the little horn being the antichrist, okay, coming to power. Again, we realize that there's a man in connection with this little horn. It says, in this horn were the eyes like a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So we realize here, you get the understanding that this antichrist springs up among these 10 horns. These 10 horns are in existence before the 11th horn, okay? And it comes out of the Roman Empire territory, because that's what we discussed in the other vision, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And in this beast, it says this beast had 10 horns. Okay, and while Daniel was thinking about these 10 horns, lo and behold, this other little horn appears with the eyes like a man and speaking. And we know that that's the Antichrist. And then in the subsequent verses, it talks about how these different thrones and these kingdoms and these kings, that's the 10 horns, these 10 kings, which we will talk about, that God ultimately and Jesus Christ comes back and takes dominion over this kingdom and over the kingdoms of the earth and all the things that the devil's tried to do in our history to gain control and power over this earth. And yet God and Jesus Christ come at the time of this future empire, okay, represented by the feet and toes, and also by these 10 horns on this beast coming out of the Roman Empire territory. And this Antichrist somehow has a connection to it here, it says in Daniel, okay, that springs up amongst these 10. So we'll go into that a little bit too. But that's what I wanted you to see there, that God comes and ultimately, takes over the kingdoms of this world. All right. But what's interesting about these 10 is, if you go on further in chapter 7, okay, and you read about the 10 horns, you say, well, what are these 10 horns? We answered that before, but if you keep reading in Daniel chapter 7, okay, it says in verse 23, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth. And we're going to say that's Rome and what we've been discussing here, based on what we've been saying. It shall be diverse and shall devour the whole earth and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. Now, again, the Bible often says the whole earth or the whole world should be taxed, like in the New Testament. And we know that the people in the Amazon basin weren't taxed, and people in the Eskimos and people living up in the North Pole weren't taxed. But the known world where the vast majority of the populations of the earth at the given time, around the Middle East in there, is what they're referring to. And it's no different in this case. Rome was a huge empire. It conquered many peoples, and we showed the boundaries and some maps about that on the last video. So in this instance, it's basically talking about the whole earth in regards, of that area centered around the Mediterranean, the known peoples and stuff at that time, especially in relation to how those empires and peoples related to God and his timeline and his people and Israel and things of that nature. So then it goes on to say in verse 24, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. Okay? So that proves that there's going to be 10 kings. Okay? That coincides with the 10 toes in the earlier vision. All right? Makes sense, doesn't it? So that kind of gives credibility to the fact, and the iron with the iron, the teeth with the iron legs in the other dream, that these are talking about the same thing here. And it says, out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. So we know that now that horns are basically represented as kingdoms or kings or different rulers over those individual kingdoms. And if it's out of this kingdom or Rome, then it's showing you that, there's going to be a future kingdom coming out of what would be the old Roman Empire territories. Again, we had 2 legs and 2 feet, which means obviously there's a western and an eastern division of that empire. Okay, that stands to reason for me. Okay, 5 toes on each foot. Okay, so 5 of these kings presumably would come from the western side. Okay, and five of the toes would be from the eastern, or like the Byzantine side of what was the Roman Empire, or what it had turned into. And then it goes on to say, in verse 24, another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first horns, and he shall subdue 3. So again, this is in reference to the future Antichrist. This is that little horn. Another shall rise after them, after the initial 10. Okay, he is diverse from the first horns, and he shall subdue 3. So if you were to consider that 3, if these 10 toes and the 10 horns are kings or kingdoms, okay, ruled over by a king or a monarch of some sort, an authoritarian ruler of some sort, then this Antichrist that comes to power, okay, subdues 3. So obviously they have a kingdom of their own out of the Roman Empire territories in modern times, because God has not come back yet and set up his government on this earth yet. So at the time of this future kingdom, okay, obviously if he subdues 3, that means they're not all going along with, or they want to maintain power for themselves, but yet this Antichrist subdues 3. So remember, 3 of the horns were plucked up by the roots, okay? And what I find interesting is around the time. Let me see if I can find that time frame for you, of those kings or the brothers that ruled. It said in 364 A.D. Emperor Valentinian I divided the empire into the western and eastern sections. putting himself in power in the west and his brother Valens in the east. Now, you can do your own research on that and look into that a little further if you'd like. But what I think is interesting is I'll provide you the map of 364. And what's interesting, I think, is I can at least show you on that map where you'll see that it was divided up into basically 10 regions. Okay. Now, I'm not saying at the time of Valens and his brother, Valentinian or whatever the first, are those 10 kings. But it proves and shows you that the Eastern and Western division aspect of it. And what is also interesting is it also shows you that the Western and Eastern kingdom had 5 divisions, which somebody who drew this map of 364 AD, at least the concept is there to show you that out of the Roman Empire territory, there can be 10 divisions. And I'm going to show you that. And you'll see that 5 actually lie within the boundaries of the western side, and 5 fall within the boundaries of the eastern side. So if it happened in the past, as we know with human nature, we have wars and we repeat the wars. We do things as human creatures and we do them again in the future. If it can be done then, and someone can decide to separate this geographical boundaries of the Roman Empire and divide it exactly into 10 regions, then it can be certainly done again and will be done again according to the Bible, where there will be 10 regions inside what used to be the Roman Empire territory, and they will be ruled by 10 kings. Now, what they call those regions, whether it's modern day countries anymore, we may never know. I hope not to be here during that time. I hope none of us are here to see all this, during the time of the Antichrist. The point I'm trying to make is if I show you that it can be done and the 10 kings are there and there's 10 zones or regions, then it can be done again, and it will be done again, because the Bible has always been proven to be true. They try to disprove and discredit the Bible, and in the Bible through archaeology and things, they dig up exactly what the Bible said anyway. So I'm just saying, be aware that there will be a yet future kingdom, and it'll be divided and ruled by 10 kings or kingdoms or whatever you want to call it, whatever the world decides to call it, and for whatever reason this happens. Again, some geopolitical upheavals in Europe and stuff, the stuff we see going on now, could be a precursor to this. And it may necessitate the formation of 10 geographical zones within and out of the Roman Empire territory. That's the 10 toes and the 10 kings we're speaking of. And an antichrist subdues 3, so he has to take over them by force, basically. He plucks them up by the roots, and he gets control over them. Okay, so I wanted to go into Revelation, okay, and we'll just go a little bit over to, I believe, chapter 7, just to give a little bit of a little bit more into this future future world empire. Okay, let's go on to let's see. Bear with me on this. Trying to go through some notes. So let's go to chapter 13. Okay, this is in the book of Revelation. This is why you have to study Revelation with Daniel in detail. It kind of makes it all, the light bulb kind of go off in your head. But it says in chapter 13, verse 1, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Okay. And it goes on to say that this beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and seat and authority. Okay, so what's interesting there is Um, he stood upon the sea, and we realize that this beast rises up out of the sea having 7 heads and 10 horns. We discussed that um, horns represent kings and kingdoms. So, and we see that this beast, the dragon gives this beast, which was like a leopard. We discussed a leopard was like the Greek Empire. So this beast has elements of the Greek Empire in it and countries that were assimilated by it. His feet were as the feet of a bear. We discussed the bear being the Medo-Persian Empire, so it has elements in countries. Whether we keep the modern names of Iran or Afghanistan are intact in this future time, that remains to be seen. But it's very interesting. It has the mouth of a lion. We discussed that was Babylon. We discussed that Rome had absorbed, the Roman Empire had absorbed some of these elements, the Greek, the Babylonian, and the Medo-Persian elements into its empire. And what's interesting is it says this beast, the dragon, gave him his power. So the dragon we know is the devil, and that the devil and Satan is basically behind all these world empires that are not under the authority and control. Well, God ultimately controls the world and everything, and He has, is allowing this to go on until He comes back and takes everything over. Okay, but if you will, the devil's like the pseudo ruler of these kingdoms. Okay, he's trying to be the adversary of God in everything that happens down here on this earth to come against God in every way he can, and through these various empires. Um, it talks about the authority that Satan gives to these world governments through fallen angels and the work of demonic spirits influencing the hearts and minds of human beings on this earth to do his will versus God's will. Okay, and it talks about the heads having the names of blasphemy. Well, if you understand this beast in Revelation as being merely just the governments and empires of earthly peoples under the sway of evil beings, okay, aka the devil and his minions, then you realize that the names of blasphemy against God and doing things contrary to God's will and God's nature is what Satan is trying to do and enforce through these authoritarian empires and governments. And we realize that there's a future antichrist coming to power over a future kingdom. And that's kind of what I wanted to get into. Um, and that and it says it had 7 heads. Now we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I wanted to tell you was it said it had 10 horns. Well, if you were to understand that what we talked about in Daniel, the 10 toes and the 10 horns are the same, and they come out of a future empire, out of the Roman Empire territories, geographically speaking, then you realize that one of the heads, this future empire, not the Greek Empire and the Medo Persian Empire or the Assyrian and Babylonian empires, but this future empire coming out of what used to be the Roman Empire, okay, this future 10 king confederation, if you will, is the one with 10 horns. Then you realize that this beast with characteristics and elements of all those world empires, that one of the heads has to be this kingdom with the 10 kings and the 10 toes. So it's 10 horns on one of the heads of this beast, not 10 horns all over all the heads. It's on one of the heads. So I just want to read a little bit more. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So we'll go on and continue a little bit in Revelation 17. Okay. And it's talking, again, a little bit about, the kingdoms of this of these empires and blasphemous empires set up under Satan. And it says, here is the mind that has wisdom. This is 17, Revelation, verse 9. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, one is, and the other is not yet come. So if you were to consider Now we can get into this, but I'll just kind of give you a little teaser with it. That there are seven kings, or the seven heads, or seven heads on this beast that looks like a leopard, bear, and a lion. Okay, those are all those kingdoms we've been studying. Okay, they have elements of Greece, Medo Persia, and Rome in it. And so basically, the seven heads represent seven kingdoms that have been around on this earth. It says five are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. And it goes on to say, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goes into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Okay, so let's just talk about that for a few moments. So if you understand that this beast that you see in Revelation with the seven heads, just understand that as the beast is a big giant geopolitical empire of governments that have done horrible things on this earth, and especially in relation to Israel, who God had chosen and set apart to bring the gospel and the good news of himself and salvation to the world. And since the devil didn't want that to happen and doesn't want people to know about God and Jesus and how to be in God's family and live forever and be saved, he has always tried to thwart that and come against that in any way he can, with a heavy hand, putting the boot on the back of people's necks and making these empires. And so think of that as one big giant political, religious, whatever means necessary involved with political and religious systems to oppress Israel, because they were the ones that that the prophets came through, and Jesus ultimately came through to teach us about God. And so these empires come against Israel, and at all these different stages have taken over Israel and taken over that territory and oppressed them as a nation. So if you understand, those seven heads are basically Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome. That would be six of the seven heads. This seventh head with the 10 horns, what we were told were 10 kings, is on this beast as well. So that's the yet future kingdom that's going to come. And on that seventh head are the 10 horns, which means it's basically an empire of 10 regions, and 10 people come to power. And it says here in Revelation, it says five are fallen. So if you were to understand that basically Egypt and Assyria, Babylon, Medo Persia, and Greece were fallen by the time of John writing the book of Revelation, okay? One is, which was Rome in John's day, and the other is not yet come. That's the feet we're talking about that comes out of the empire that was in existence in Rome's day and John's day, which was Rome. Then it says that future that when he comes must continue a short space. That's telling you that their kingdom doesn't last very long. It's not in existence very long, and it's certainly not in existence to any extent like Rome was and these other great empires. And we know that ultimately, we spoke of the antichrist subduing three of this 10 nation, if you will, empire of the future, that the antichrist gains control over it, okay, and because he subdued three of them, all right. And it says the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. Well, we'll go into that a little bit more and explain what is going on there. But it's one of the seven. There's going to be another kingdom after this seventh. So what's happening here? It's the eighth. Okay. So we get to this future kingdom, which is the seventh head. We know the Antichrist. Remember that little horn popping up, and he amongst the 10. So during the time of this future kingdom of 10 regions in the Roman Empire territory, their kingdom doesn't last very long. And we know that the devil, the dragon, gives this particular kingdom the authority that they get. So ultimately, it's an evil kingdom. And they don't fully go along or cooperate with the antichrist, who was that other little horn that pops up amongst the 10. And he subdues three. And then we realize that they end up giving him their power. Okay. And once he gains control of that kingdom, that 10 nation empire, he basically has his own empire. He controls the 10 kings at this point, not 10 individual warlords or 10 individual, you know, sectors with their independent rule. He subdues three and then they give him their power. The devil ultimately turns it over to Antichrist, who comes up. He gains control of it, and therefore he becomes basically the eighth kingdom. So that's the best way to understand that. And again, it says in verse 12, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, as when John, you know, that wrote, got the revelation and wrote it down for us and spoke it to us. Um, they reign 1 hour with the beast, which we will explain in further study, is the Antichrist. It says, these kings have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast or the Antichrist. These kings shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, meaning Jesus Christ is the Lamb that was sacrificed for us. He sacrificed himself on the cross so that we could be forgiven of our sins. He was the ultimate sacrifice. If we accept him as our Savior and believe that he paid the penalty for our sins in faith, we'll go to heaven if we put our trust in him. So ultimately, these wicked kings of this empire are taken over somewhat by the Antichrist, and then they give their power and strength unto him. And it says they go to war with God himself. Remember, we talked about the kingdoms being taken over by God. God's coming back to this earth as a general, and he's going to set up his kingdom down here and not let all this evil continue. There is an end to all this evil and all this political, uh, just evil all over the world. Okay. And it says they're going to make war with Jesus, basically, the Lamb, and well, it says, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So that's the really cool thing to think about. Is I hope that helped. We'll go more into now that we basically have an understanding of the beasts in Daniel and this beast in Revelation. We'll go a little bit more in depth with it, but you understand that um, there's a future empire coming, and it's within out of the geographical boundaries of what was the Roman Empire. And based on what I'm showing you with the maps and everything, it's not something that can't happen. It will happen because God said it will. That's what I believe. You see that it's been divided into 10 areas before, it'll happen again. And it will be an evil form of government. It will be opposed to God. It'll have its authority given to it by the devil. And the devil will use the Antichrist to subdue three of those wicked kings and basically take the empire over for himself, and will institute himself as the ultimate ruler over the kingdom as he wants to rule it, and basically set up his own Antichrist kingdom, if you will. No longer the kingdom of the 10. It'll be the kingdom of him. Okay? And he will cause peoples of this world to come against God himself, who will come through and split through outer space, time space continuum into our dimension, whatever you want to understand it, however you can understand it, will actually come back to this earth, and they will try to fight against God to keep him from setting up his kingdom of peace and righteousness onto this earth, which is what he is going to do. And that God wins, and ultimately Satan and the Antichrist and all that he's tried to do to mankind and has done to us is going to be put down. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Jesus wins, and he's cool, and righteousness and good things are coming. But there's a time of evil coming. And so just, be watchful for it. But ultimately, let's prepare our hearts so we don't have to be going through it. So that's all I wanted to say. We'll get into more about this future kingdom and antichrist stuff in Revelation next. And we'll probably take a few videos. We'll do a few showing that the 10 toes and the 10 kings of those two visions are the same. We'll go through a few scriptures to support that. And then we'll just try to get a better understanding of that beast in Revelation. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave some comments, and hopefully we'll be able to do some live streams and join in, and you know, it'll be kind of cool. So thanks again. Have a good night. Bye.